Listen to this podcast now
on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
This is the Cats Roundtable with John Catsimatidis.
Everywhere around the world, they come to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come to America.
Good morning, New York. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Catsimatidis here, Sunday morning. Steve Cates looking up in the skies. Congresswoman Nicole Mayotakis. John Cherritt. How did the markets do? Jim Gennaro talking about the horses in Central Park. Tom DiNapoli, the controller of the state of New York. Andrew Bean, the Citizens Budget Commission. Senator George Borrello. Adriana Vamvakis about suing for insurance fraud. Bruce Blakeman, running for governor of the state of New York. And let's start off with Michael Stoller to give us the real estate report for the week.
Good morning. This is Mike Stoller for the Stoller Real Estate Report. What's happening in the multifamily world? A lot of interesting things are taking place. There's a new mayor, so we're going to see different changes going on. There are investors coming from around the world still investing in New York. But today I have a senior guy in the investment sales business, an owner-operator, specifically in the boroughs. I have Lev
Mavashev.
Okay.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Pleasure to be
Lev
back here.
is the founder and principal at Alpha Realty.
Thank you. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. So you were saying it's 17 years. So what's happening? How do you look at right now compared to the beginning when you went into the market?
Oh, it's very different. Well, I actually started in 2009, so I kind of went through the, just coming out of, through the great financial crisis and coming out of it. I would say the market's very different now. If I had to describe it, I would say it's pretty, let's call it selective.
What do you mean by selective?
So there's a lot of capital out there. And even more capital planning to be active in 26, both private and institutional, and foreign, of course. But it's selective, meaning like it's discipline and it's selective where it ends up. Kind of, I would say, depending on the product, right? So multifamily space, there's products within the asset class, anywhere from, your pre-war rent-stabilized building to your newly constructed free market, more core asset type of stuff. So for, let's call it the A products, right? The free market, well-located buildings in Manhattan, especially if it's value add, there's a lot of capital chasing those type of deals. I get those deals I get those deals in a bidding war. I'll have, right now we're working on there's a $19 million deal and a $30 million deal where we have over 10 bidders on both of those.
And where are these bidders from?
It's most of it is I would say private equity backed operators, institutional capital definitely chasing those type of deals. Not so much for the foreigners. The foreigners don't like the value add stuff. They like more of the, I would say, turnkey core stabilized cash flowing stuff, not rent stabilized as in like market rate rents.
But there's a big interest in units of 10 or less, correct?
There is a big, yes. So it's interesting. Yeah. We've been doing a lot of those type of deals. Last quarter, we're seeing a shift. So transaction wise, we've seen less transactions, but dollar volume, we've seen a surge in dollar volume. It kind of shows that capital's starting to chase the bigger stuff. We are seeing a lot of the trades on the smaller stuff, especially like your typical, I would say 8/2 on the Avenue in Brooklyn, especially if it's free market, right? You have You have a lot of capital. It's a protected tax class, meaning it's a 2A, 2B. There's a cap on, where taxes could, property tax could increase. So those are getting a lot of interest from both local private investors and institutional capital, like the Carlyles. We all know they build a whole portfolio in Brooklyn of these buildings. There's definitely a lot of capital chasing those, but I'm seeing more capital chasing the bigger, more quality product right now. So that that's what I meant by selective. Let's call it also markets kind of diverging. You have the A product, which is pretty healthy market for that, and then you have not the B. Let's call it the C product, where there's almost no market for that, and that's your rent stabilized building out in the Bronx or Harlem, whatever. It's tough to get buyers for that type of product right now. There's a handful of guys buying that type of stuff, but if they pass on the deal, then there's almost no bidders for that type of stuff.
What about the 485X program?
Well, it's definitely driving more development, at least from what I'm hearing and seeing. I speak to developers all day. I speak to them more on the other side when they're ready to kind of exit from their development, whether I sell it, or when they finish the building and they lease it up, they're always debating whether they're going to refinance or sell it. So I get involved in that end of it. But from what I'm hearing and seeing, development sites seem to be pretty active right now. There is a lot of sites that I see trading, a lot of developers chasing deals right now. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's spurring this whole development boom that we think it is, but for, let's say, call it these 99-unit buildings, yeah. They're generally...
Why don't you explain what the 99-unit buildings
are? 485X, it's a tax abatement that's incentivizing these developers to build, but the minute you go over 100 units and over, you lose. You have wage requirements, right? I joke, a housing incentive bill. It turned out to be a labor bill, but yeah, just to avoid the higher construction costs for building 100 up, mostly due to union wages. Developers are trying to keep the buildings 99 units and below. So it's funny. I think we're going to see a city of 99 unit buildings. Maybe one day in the distant future, they're going to wonder. There must have been like a lucky number thing about 99 units because all these new.
So is that what we bet on Lotto? Or Powerball? Could be.
It's a good bet. Let's try it.
It's a good bet over there. So I know I will see you in 2026. I thank Lev for being here today.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Jim Gennaro, a 17-year city councilman out of Queens, and he's worried about the horses in Central Park. Well, Jim, how did you get involved with the horses in Central Park?
I've been working with this industry as going back to the days when I was a staff member of the city council, going back to 1990 when I first came to the council. There was a big hearing back then, and I was assigned by then Speaker Vallone to work with the animal rights advocates, to work with the industry, and to see what was up. And I was struck back at the time that back then, the industry had been around for 125 years. Now it's been around for 150 years. And not one charge of animal cruelty had ever been sustained at that point, and has still never been sustained. And I thought it was a wonderful industry. I also go back a long time as someone who rides horses. So that was why I was picked to do this. I've been riding horses for 59 years, and so I know a lot about horses. And we had a good colloquy between all the parties
in Central Park. Why is such an argument? When I talked to all the people in the city hall, they said to me, having the horses in Central Park is probably the best solution. What's the problem now?
You mean having them there? Like having stables in the park
having
itself?
Stables in Central Park and not having the horses in the streets.
I think the Central Park Conservancy would have a real problem with having the horse housed in the park. Plus, they already have housing. All they have to do is traverse from the west side to the park, and that really is not a problem. There used to be a lot of rides in the streets, and now they only operate in the park. So I don't see the back and forth from the stables to the park to be a big deal, and I don't know as though that would ever pass muster because...
is this going to be up to the city council?
I think it would be more than that because if you're taking parkland and you're using it for a purpose other than parks, meaning putting up some kind of, housing there may be a call to alienate that section of parkland where the horses are going to be, or they could just be owned by the city. This all remains to be seen. This really, I think anything that would preserve the industry, I would be open to, having a conversation about. But I, go back a long time with this industry. They're, really good people. It's an immigrant industry. These are great immigrant stories. People come here, work real hard, and they, start out shoveling hay. Next thing you know, they're like an apprentice driver, and then they get their license. And it's a great way for new New Yorkers, to come and get the American dream.
How would you sort these things out? I mean, the problem out. How did the city council people read it?
Many members of the city council are influenced by the animal rights advocates, and if you're running for office, you don't want to be on the bad side of that group. For me, myself, I don't care. I do what I think is right, but I think that is what's going on here. But, the more one gets educated about this industry and the health of the horses and the relationship that the drivers have with the horses and the engagement of the union, you realize that everything is really doing well, and particularly an industry that has never, ever had accusation of animal abuse ever sustained.
I got to get done. Jim Gennaro, bottom line, we only have a minute left. What's going to happen?
I think we're going to reach an agreement by which the industry stays afloat. How that actually happens, whether they, sell off the stables they have now, but anything that sustains the industry is something that I could live with. And of course, I'll be working with John Samuelson, who is a great representative for this good industry. And so I just want to make sure that people can continue to have rides, and I will use my 35 years of working with this industry to try to prevail on my colleagues to come to some common sense here.
Jim Gennaro, city councilman for 17 years at Queens. Thank you for your comments on the horses.
John, it's a pleasure to be with you and your listeners, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and busts. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us today is Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis. And Nicole, tell me what's on your mind the first Sunday of the new year.
Well, Happy New Year, John, and everyone listening. It's been a great 2025 for the people of New York and our district. We restored the SALT deduction for families earning less than $500,000. We delivered tax relief for tipped workers, those who work overtime, as well as our senior citizens on Social Security. So this year, when people file their taxes, they're going to see how they'll benefit because Republicans delivered the largest tax cut in American history. So we're looking forward to seeing what's up this year. Sadly, New York State doesn't want to match the tax relief that we provided on the federal level. And so tipped workers in particular, those who work overtime, they're not going to see as much of a benefit as many other states in the country because the state doesn't want to allow for this type of relief to trickle down to state and local taxes. So we're pushing Governor Kathy Hochul, and I'll be joining colleagues this week to really put pressure on our state legislature to pass these deductions and these benefits at the state level so we could see our tipped workers really benefit.
I mean, these are hard-working people, and they depend on tips. Nobody ever reports them correctly, so they feel like that they're in jeopardy, that if they're off by something, that they get audited. Why not make it all the tips tax-free in New York State, too, besides the federal?
That's right. I mean, look, for all their rhetoric, the people who control our state, from our governor to our legislative leaders, They talk about wanting to help the working person, and now here's a real opportunity to allow people who work really hard to keep their money, whether they're a hairdresser, as you said, a cab driver or a waiter, but even those who earn overtime, right? Our police officers, construction workers, people who really put in a lot of hours. They deserve to have their first $25,000 in overtime or in tips be tax deductible. And this is really a way that we can help people with the affordability crisis here in New York. But once again, the rhetoric that we hear from the Democrats who run New York and what they're actually doing is very different. And so we, again, call on the state legislature and the governor to match these tax-free programs that we put in place at the federal level so they could truly benefit. I also want to add senior citizens who have an income of less than $75,000 or $150,000 if they're married, they're going to see their tax that they paid on Social Security refunded to them when they do their filing in April. That is huge. That is really going to make a difference in the lives of many seniors who are struggling to get by in an expensive state like New York. And then the SALT deduction, John, people in Staten Island and Brooklyn, they're going to benefit tremendously from this. And this is why I fought so hard for this provision and the senior tax provision.
Yeah, explain to him, not everybody really knows what the word SALT means.
SALT is state and local taxes. What you pay in state and local taxes, you will be able to deduct. So you'll pay less on the federal level. You won't be basically taxed twice. For example, your property taxes, if you are a homeowner on Staten Island, or, if you're a worker, obviously everybody pays state taxes. Families earning less than $500,000 will be able to deduct up to $40,000 on their federal income taxes. So that will save them a lot of money. And we're also proud, by the way, of increasing...
Didn't we fight the Revolutionary War on that? Double taxation without representation.
That's right, and they do have representation. That's why we were able to deliver this, because we fought for it as their representatives. I should remind everyone, by the way, every Democrat in New York City, from Chuck Schumer to Hakeem Jeffries, voted against the no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, and they voted against extending and increasing the child tax credit for families. $2,200 per child families in New York will be receiving. And that is going to put a lot more money in people's pockets and allow them to spend on their own families instead of giving it to the government. So, look, we're proud of the work we delivered working with President Trump. I'm a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. I'm the only Republican from New York City, obviously, so gave our city a voice at the table delivering these tax cuts. And it's unfortunate that the Democrats didn't join us in passing it because it's real savings for people. They talk a lot about making our city affordable, getting more money in your pockets. But then when it comes to acting on it, they literally voted to let all these tax cuts expire or to not allow them to exist at all. That would have been a significant thousands of dollars increase had we let the original tax cuts expire and then not do these things.
Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis, Happy New Year. And things are moving in the right direction, and let's keep it going in the right direction.
We're only getting started, John, and we're going to be doing more in 2026. Thank you very much for having me.
The Cats Roundtable.
And with us today is Bruce Blakeman, the county executive of Nassau County, and also he's running for governor of the state of New York. How do you see things in the new year?
I think that help is on the way for the state of New York, so this will be a year where we finally elect a governor that cares about the people of the state and make people happy again in the state of New York. People are miserable with the high taxes and the high crime. The fact that we're not affordable is something that weighs very heavily on people, whether you're young, middle-aged, or older. People want an affordable environment. I put it together in Nassau County, but in New York State they would like the same type of affordable environment where people have prosperity, job creation, they can afford not only the necessities of life, but luxuries and other things that make them happy.
Gasoline has come down. Interest rates are coming down, so it can make new home buying affordable again. And I think 2026 is going to be a great year because I think the inflation rate and the greatness of the United States is going to be shown in 26.
Well, I think President Trump can take credit for that, but certainly not Kathy Hochul. She hasn't made this a more affordable state. Gasoline prices are down because President Trump has opened up the exploration and the drilling for more oil. He has made it easier to use cleaner coal. He has supported the exploration and the drilling for natural gas. Kathy Hochul wanted to cancel the pipeline that would bring new energy resources here to New York State. She has engaged in programs that benefit her contributors, like those windmills in the ocean off the coast of Long Island.
And not only that, everybody has testified that the cost of energy for those windmills is probably 5 times, 6 times more than regular electricity.
It was insanity. Why would we put these huge windmills in the middle of the ocean where just the construction and engineering costs of putting them there are so cost prohibitive? And these construction companies, many of them from other countries that invested in these as part of what I call the green energy scam, money was going in people's pockets, but they weren't producing energy that was cost efficient and cheap. As you said, it's probably the most expensive energy generation that we have. We should be concentrating on fracking on the southern tier of New York, where they allow it in Pennsylvania. We need to bring economic development to the southern tier. We need cheap energy. With AI, we're going to need data centers that soak up a lot of energy resources. There are electric vehicles now that require more from our grid. The way to do that is a combination of different energy sources and not just invest in what I call, again, these green energy scams that they're very expensive. And think about what they do to our coastline and how they hurt commercial fishing and recreational fishing.
It's bad for the environment.
It's bad for security, too, because there have been some security experts that said that these windmills would mask submarine traffic and also aviation traffic, which would be a danger to the national security of our country. So I am very happy that President Trump canceled that. We need to continue that pipeline, and we need to use all of our resources to bring energy costs down. You know, it's just gotten ridiculous, the fact that there's been a war on natural gas in New York State. People want natural gas. It's wrong that we just invest in one energy source. Kathy Hochul said we had to be all electric by 2030. That's a complete pipe dream.
Bruce Blakeman, thank you for worrying about the taxpayer. And let's catch up and continue to discuss all the issues that are in front of the taxpayer.
Excellent. And Kathy Hochul and I do agree on one thing, and that's that the Buffalo Bills should win today.
Sounds good. Have a great weekend. With us today is Senator George Borrello. George, Senator, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a new year, John, but we want to look at some old problems in Albany. We saw what's going on in Minnesota and the billions of dollars in fraud that is occurring in our Medicaid program. And myself and the entire Republican conference in the New York State Senate has sent a letter to the governor asking her to open an investigation and an audit of all of these programs. This is likely a multi-billion-dollar scam that's going on across New York State, but particularly in blue states like New York, where clearly there has been no investigation of this fraud. And we know it's happening here in New York. It's happening in New York in the Medicaid non-emergency transportation program. It's happening in several programs here in New York. So you know it's happening, and it's time for us to stand up as tax-paying New Yorkers of any party saying enough is enough. Let's clear out the fraud here in New York State.
I really believe that if we got rid of the fraud in the United States of America and the money we're giving away on stupid things in the rest of the world, maybe that $2 trillion deficit might go away.
Well, we have to. This is not just about taxpayer money. This is borrowing money against future generations. Keep in mind the federal government last year borrowed over $2 trillion with a T, $2 trillion to provide services. So how can we afford to pay out hundreds of billions of dollars a year in fraud fraudulent claims, in some cases going to terrorist organizations in countries like Somalia, and burden future generations with this massive federal debt. It is the biggest threat to our national security, and the fact that we are supporting fraudulent programs across this country is just absolutely shameful, and we have to address it for the future of our country and certainly for future generations.
But what happened in Minnesota? It happened for $1 billion. I mean, everybody was worried about it happened for $1 billion, but it looks like it's multiple times of that.
And look, let's not forget one thing. There are a lot of people out there that are making a lot of money off of this that are donating to quite frankly, the people in charge. And in the case of New York and Minnesota and California, it's the Democrats in charge. You're seeing that over and over here in New York State. I mean, finally, reluctantly, the Attorney General here in New York started going after Medicaid fraud, particularly this Medicaid and non-emergency medical transportation. And she found over a dozen cases just last year alone where there was massive fraud in this program. This is basically where taxi drivers take people to non-emergency medical appointments. And these transportation brokers that were created by Andrew Cuomo about a decade ago are profiting millions upon millions of dollars because the longer the trip is, the more money they make. And yet, even though this has been exposed, even though the governor is aware of it, the Medicaid redesign team pointed it out years ago, Andrew Cuomo knew it was a total boondoggle. Despite that, nothing has changed. Why? Because the principals of these transportation brokers are big donors to Kathy Hochul, and she doesn't want to make any changes. So let's be clear about one thing. When you see fraud in your face, like is occurring here in New York and across this country, and you know that nothing's being done about it, that's when we have to ask ourselves, why? Follow the money.
Senator, I keep repeating the same number as comparison between New York and Florida, where New York City and New York State has a $370 billion budget for 19.7 million people. Florida, for 23.9 million people, has a total budget of $120 billion. Where's the rest of the money?
Well, it's astounding, John. First of all, to add to your numbers, let's talk about Medicaid again. 44% of New Yorkers are on Medicaid. That is an astounding number.
But there's more elderly people in Florida.
Well, Medicaid, we're not talking Medicare. I'm talking Medicaid. Medicaid is not an age-related like it is with Medicare. We're talking about, people that are getting the best health insurance coverage, quite frankly, where you can wander into an emergency room and have everything covered, even when you have a non-emergency, and you can show up in an emergency room. And thanks to Kathy Hochul and the Democrats in charge, that emergency room has to care for all your needs, even though it's not an emergency situation, and will not be reimbursed enough, quite frankly, to provide those services. So it's a great deal for if you want to come and live off the taxpayers in New York State. This is the best place in the world to not work, New York State. And that's why our budget is so high. The biggest percentage of our $254 billion state budget is social welfare programs. It's Medicaid. It's SNAP. It's all those other programs that are absolutely dripping with fraud that no one wants to, quite frankly, no one wants to reform, because the less people on means less people voting for Democrats, unfortunately.
Let's see how things sort themselves out.
Actually, I will take, the saying that I like better from a Brit, and that is the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. That's what Margaret Thatcher said, and she was right. And here we are in New York State with socialism, quite frankly, spreading like cancer across the state, particularly in New York City. Eventually they're going to run out of other people's money, and let's hope that day comes sooner than later.
Thank you so much for coming on for the first Sunday of the new year.
Happy New Year.
You are listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. And with us today is Andrew Brain, and he is the president of the Citizens Budget Commission. And he's going to tell us where is the budget and what is the truth. Andrew, our citizens are waiting for the answers.
So, here we are. We have a new mayor, and the city council has given him an extra couple of weeks, but by mid-February, he has to propose his first budget. The city budget's now $120 billion. But when he comes in, he has to close the next year's budget gap, which is $5 to $8 billion. He has to make sure he can deal with any federal cuts, make sure we're ready for a recession, and he has proposed a whole host of new spending programs, and that is a tall order to meet all those masters. It's a surmountable task, but he has to make choices, not just try to do everything for everybody.
The rumors I hear, and it's just rumors, that they're short, like I think you said, maybe $6 billion. And some of the new projects he wants to do is another $10 billion. And he's certainly not going to borrow that from the state, because I don't think they have it. Unless he cooperates with the federal government, they're not going to voluntarily give him anything.
This is exactly the challenge. I mean, he has been somewhat realistic since winning the general election, saying that he needs to make progress. You're not going to get everything tomorrow, which is a good first step. But what does that progress look like? At what cost, and where do you get the money? Now, he can make progress on child care, and there are affordability challenges in the city for some people. That's important. He galvanized the electorate with saying we need a more affordable city. That resonated with people. But what we have to first do is look at the part of that $120 billion we're already spending and say, where are we not getting the value? We have schools that are getting smaller and smaller, yet we give them more money. Not that kids don't need education, they do. But we're spending $41,000 a kid and not delivering education. Let's look at that money and put it somewhere else that's higher use. We have 140 different welfare benefit funds for union locals. If we consolidated them, we could save almost $200 million. You have to start combing through the city budget and shifting money, not just adding. Because what he's proposed, of course, is to raise the personal income tax, to raise business taxes, both of which he doesn't have the authority to do as a mayor, but both of which also would harm our competitiveness. You know, we need people to want to be and businesses to want to be in New York. Our share of the nation's millionaires has been shrinking. If we kept our share of the nation's millionaires the same, we'd have $3 billion more in tax dollars in the city today. That's money people could use. We've got to think about this differently, shifting the money and keeping businesses and people here to pay the taxes to support the services.
The key item, Andrew, and I tell this to everybody, Florida is up to 23.9 million people. New York is down to like 19.7 million people, 4 million people differential. If you add up the budget for New York State and New York City, it's 370 billion, and Florida is only 120. Where's the rest of the money?
The reality is New York has always provided a wide array of services and more than Florida, and there's some good that comes with that. But that differential is way too much. We need to look at what value we're getting for our dollar. We asked New Yorkers how good you think the services are. 27% of New Yorkers said New York City public services are good or excellent. It used to be 47% before the pandemic. Only 27% were not getting value for the money. Our kids are having middling marks in schools, yet we're spending $41,000, twice the national average, to educate each kid. We have to manage government better. And I will say this, Mayor Mamdani has talked a lot about, he's a believer in government. Who better than a believer in government to go in there and make sure it works for the people?
Do you know any businesses that say we want to move our business to a factory to New York?
Well, certainly we haven't been a manufacturing center for major, factories for a long time. But New York is still a good place. There are people look at what you've done in New York, and you've committed to New York. But we need people to want to be here. It's amazing to think that the capital of capital, New York City, is the place that's growing millionaires at a slower rate than the country on average. That's, our millionaires, yes, they've doubled in the last 12 years, but they've tripled everywhere else and quadrupled in Florida. This should be the place that people come and want to make money. And right now, business taxes in New York City, check this out. New York City businesses pay combined city, state, and MTA region tax of 17.44%. Across the river in New Jersey, they're paying 11.5%. We need to be competitive. It's a little complicated when you analyze what business taxes mean to competitiveness, but we can't have that upward pressure on prices, and we can't be sending a signal to businesses that it costs more to be here.
So what's the answer? Do we just wait and see what happens?
Well, the answer is both with Mayor Mamdani and Governor Hochul. Listen, she's championed child care. She has an election year, and election years are notorious for people wanting to spend a lot of money in a lot of different programs. But we need both of them to hold the line on taxes, to comb through the budgets, and make New York affordable by the money we're already spending and by unleashing the private sector to build more housing and making sure that our energy is affordable. Both of them have a role to play, and the legislature and the city council, to really make sure government works for people. It doesn't have to spend more. It has to spend smart.
Let's continue to monitor it, and I look forward to talking to you again maybe in 30 days.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Tom DiNapoli, the 54th Controller of the State of New York. We almost had $50,000 on the Dow Jones. And how's the pension fund doing?
Well, the state pension fund's doing real well. We were up to, at the end of the last quarter, over $290 billion, a record high. We don't have the final numbers yet for December 31st, since that date just passed. But, you know, the market's held up, and we have a diversified portfolio. We don't just depend on the stock market. So I'm confident that for our New York State retirees, they can rest assured that their pensions are going to be there. We're concerned about where this economy is headed. We're concerned about global issues, but I think we're well positioned to weather any storm that may come. So I know you've been predicting 60,000 on the Dow. Let's see if it hits that. But
it helps all our 401k plans, and if President Trump's projections are right, it has a good possibility, because what's going down? The gas prices are down, the interest rates are coming down, and he's bringing in a lot of companies are coming back to do in the United States, which is
well. But there is still that issue, you know, John. We rely on some of these big companies that are tied very much with artificial intelligence, AI. A lot of talk that, you know, is that going to be a bubble like we had with the dot-com bubble, you know, over 20 years ago? I hope not. Remains to be seen. But AI is changing in the world, not just from an investment perspective, but it's going to mean big changes in the workplace. A lot of concern about, will it mean displacing people, less employment opportunities, or on the opposite, will it create new job opportunities? And then how will we get people to have the right kind of training, education to fill those new jobs that are being created? So we're living in a very dynamic time, that's for sure.
$290 billion in the pension fund, is that the highest it's ever been?
Yeah, that's the highest it's been. And also I should point out, we're also paying out a record amount. We paid out last year over $16 billion in benefits. So as much money as we're making coming in, the payouts are getting larger, right? More people are retiring at a higher salary level, so their pensions are higher. And you know the good news, John? Everybody's going to live to 95 or 100. What that means for us, though, is when we do the calculations for how we fund the pension, we have to assume a longer payout period. So that's why we're very careful about managing the money, but also making sure we keep the plan well funded. So good news is we're all going to live a lot longer. Challenge for me as trustee of the pension fund, I have to make sure we have enough money to pay there for everybody living to 95 and beyond.
Now we got a new mayor coming in, and the word around town is he's going to be short on the budget, and I guess he either has to borrow from the governor, Hochul, or he either has to borrow from Trump.
Well, there are a couple things. I mean, first of all, there are out-year budget gaps. The state has it also, but the city as well. And, you know, what has kept the city's budget afloat is the fact that tax revenue has been coming in higher than projected. But I think the challenge that the new mayor has is he's got some very ambitious plans going to require more spending. Child care, particularly, trying to deal with the housing issue, you know, that part of that whole affordability agenda. So I do think you will see him looking to Albany, perhaps to Washington as well, for more support. Albany, we're going to have our own challenges there because we've got our own budget gaps. But again, those budget gaps seem to be narrowing because as long as the economy is doing as well as it is, as we've talked about on your show before, John, our tax revenues keep coming in higher than projected, despite all the gloom and doom that some people say. So what's going to happen in Albany? The governor will present her budget later this month. I'm sure the mayor will come up with his ask for the legislature and the governor. It'll be part of the negotiations. I think a lot's still to be determined. Let's see what the plans are. I'm hoping for a cooperative relationship between New York City and New York State. We need New York City to succeed. We need New York State to succeed.
Well, Tom DiNapoli, have a happy new year. And let's have a healthy new year for both of us. And God bless you, and God bless New York, and God bless our country. Thank you so much.
John, thanks for all you do. Happy, healthy New Year.
You are listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. We have with us Steve Cates, otherwise known as Dr. Sky. Steve, what do you have for the new year?
Well, good morning. Happy New Year to you and all the listeners out there, John. Hey, here's a little bit of space trivia. Yesterday, on the 3rd, at noontime, Eastern Standard Time, the Earth was at its closest position to the Sun. And that numeric is 91,403,637 miles. How can we be closest when the temperatures are so cold? And the simple answer, John, the tip of the Earth, of course, changes, as many people do know. But, John, here's some exciting stories about a little bit of a wrap-up of 2025. What were some of the hot topics in astronomy and space? Well, we find out that one of the most incredible stories, maybe not always reported accurately, was about this comet called Comet 3I Atlas. Some think it was a spaceship. Others think it was a comet. But it took much of the space in the news world. And then, John, if you quickly go to space, probably one of the biggest ones of all is the success that Elon Musk has had leading the way in space, exploration with rockets. He launched, apparently, probably upwards of about 180 launches, not including his Starship. That's like 4 launches per day, or per week, excuse me. That's incredible. So those are just the tip of the iceberg of some interesting things from last year.
We're getting closer and closer to finding out new things. What is the most exciting thing you think we found out in the last year?
We found, that as astronomers, the longest and largest object in space. And this particular object, they call it Kuiper, which is a name for like a Mayan name for some kind of a bead or a string. John, the thing is a couple of billion light years across in length. Nothing in the universe that we found is that big. And that's a story, John, that really never got that much attention. But I'm sure we'll be talking more about it as this new year evolves.
Anything else going on?
Well, here's a story that you actually sent me, and doing a little more research, evidence of the location of Noah's Ark, possibly, as many people believe, on top of Mount Ararat in Turkey. Why do they think this? Well, pottery pieces have been detected. Who knows? But, John, let's put this particular craft or vessel of Noah in perspective. In biblical scripture and old-time technology, the way they wrote, they said it was apparently some 300 cubits long. Well, a cubit, we find out, is 1.5 feet. So if we believe all this, and it's fascinating, Noah's Ark was allegedly 450 feet long, grabbing, as we know, so many of the species of certain types of animals. But, John, that's amazing because we're going back into time, maybe 3000 BC. Who knows, John? Maybe we'll find relics of the actual ship. But that was an interesting story that we certainly want our listeners to hear.
But the ship on top of a mountain? Does that mean that it was underwater, that area?
Sure. And in simple terms, it must have been one hell of a flood. But the way scientists look at this, they go back in time and see just what might have happened at that particular time. And there is some evidence, John, that there was some sort of a massive flood on the Earth. But, yeah, that's a strange one, isn't it?
Me and you have talked about Antarctica when there was no ice on it. Now, you're talking about water, that Noah's Ark was on top of a mountain, and meanwhile, Antarctica at a certain point was no ice on it. How deep is the ice in Antarctica? It's significantly deep.
Miles deep, John, and we're finding out underneath the ice, at least through radar and analysis and deep core drilling, there's an area where the Russians set up a base called the Lake Vostok region. And we're finding out that there's ancient forests underneath there. So once again, Mother Earth has made some amazing changes over the course of billions of years. But I want to look at, and I think you brought up a good topic.
It wasn't billions of years. Don't forget that map from the Turkish admiral. We really don't know.
We really don't, John. So exploration is our minds in 2026. But here's a mystery of the week, John. It goes out to more about the amazingness of how unique the universe is. Here's the question. What is the most distant galaxy, and why does it matter? Well, astronomers have known that the beginning of the universe was probably 13.7 billion years ago, because the most distant object that we can actually measure is a technical term called the cosmic microwave background radiation. That's simply this in Earth language, simple Earth language. that when the explosion took place, that's the after effect of the explosion. Now, that is about the distance of 13-plus billion light years. But we found a galaxy, that is astronomers, John, that is only, how about this, 300 million years after the Big Bang. So, in other words, these were galaxies that formed, if it's all correct, 300 million years after that event took place. And the James Webb Telescope, John, is actually helping us dig deeper and deeper. These little galaxies, John, are just like red spots. So we're catching the early beginnings of how galaxies were formed. So that's the farthest of objects. They measure it in what they call the red shift of an object, meaning how far the light is shifted to the right, and we're going back in time. So the universe continues to what? Just amaze us, John. Each week we talk about these mysteries.
There's something we don't know, and I don't think we're going to find out in our lifetime.
Probably not, John, but if we look in the world of aviation as an example, when Wilbur and Orville Wright, the two bicycle men from, let's say, Dayton, Ohio, as they went on to the early sand beaches there of North Carolina, their first flight was what? Less than the width of the 747. But the point I'm making is, look how far we've gone in such a short time in the aviation world. And also, to add compliment to that, look how much we've learned in the short time we've had telescopes over the course of 500 years. I'm excited, John, about what's to come, and hopefully we will get more answers, and I'll be providing as much as I can in 2026.
Steve Cates, thank you. Let's make sure we have a great 2026, and we'll catch up again real soon.
Happy New Year to you and the listeners. Thank you, John.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Andriana Vamvakis, and she is the president of Andromeda, and also worked for the Department of Labor for 34 years. When she got a new job, she found out there's insurance fraud. A lot of accidents are staged in the construction industry. Well, Andriana, why don't you tell us about it?
I don't know what to say, John. You know, frauds are exploding across the country. Millions in some places, billions in others. In Minnesota, it's $9 billion in fraud. We're seeing up to that. In the HUD, there's a rental assistance scam, and that is nearly $5 billion. Here in New York, what are we seeing? We're seeing a fraudemic that's hitting construction and insurance fraud. So I spent 34 years, as you said, in the federal government investigating major fraud. I'm the retired Northeastern Regional Director for the Department of Labor, and in the last 2 years I've been focused on this fraud and this work. I handle cases in the millions, but This fraud is in the billions.
Oh, tell us, what actually happens in the construction industry?
Everyone is a victim of this crime. Even the president himself is a victim of this fraud. There's 2 alleged fake lawsuits that are filed in the Trump properties where our clients were performing work. And those, have people that staged accidents. So what we're doing here, we're actually paying legitimate claims. But there's claims that are not legitimate. And what we saw since the pandemic, and actually after the opening of the southern border, the staged accidents and fake injury claims skyrocketed. There's people that have questionable Social Security numbers, and their addresses are mainly in South Queens, and they're showing up in construction accident claims. So about 2/3 of the people and the cases that are fraudulent, these people are using fake identification documents.
And the judges, when you tell the judges being cooperative to get the right answers?
Our defense counsels are having a hard time filing counterclaims and even asking for IDs of people that have 3 to 4 Social Security numbers. The judges are really not giving them the opportunity to argue their case. There's a lot of defense lawyers that are complaining that they're being sanctioned by judges for even asking for the identity of some people. And there's a lot of examples of that.
How do you survive in business? I mean, we expect to get legitimate our judges to be to have truth, justice in the American way.
And it seems that the judges are, and the system, the way it's become at this point in time, is biased towards the plaintiff and the trial lawyers. So the Building Trades Employer Association reported that the building insurance premiums in New York are 10%. And some reports go up to 14%. And if you compare this to New Jersey, they're at 2 to 3%. So it's very difficult to build here in New York, and it's very difficult for the honest contractors, and the taxpayers are the ultimately paying the price. So when Zoran Mandani comes into office and he's talking about affordable housing, one thing that he really needs to concentrate on, that rents are high because of the high insurance costs. And this pandemic is contributing to this high rent and high real estate and high prices in New York as a whole.
Now, are you suing in the federal courts or state courts or city courts?
Well, we have filed multiple federal RICO lawsuits in Eastern District, and we're targeting law firms, organized networks, and runners. This is an entire racket. The suits have a chilling effect. People are thinking twice about filing cases that are false. It seems that since we've done these actions, we saw 300 state cases by large personal injury law firms that have been dropped, and we saw a decrease in the amount of cases that have been filed. Since I've been working on this in the past 2 years, I can say that in our organization, there's been a real decline in these lawsuits that have been filed.
Well, Adriana Vamvakis will have you back on again maybe in 30 or 60 days and you give us an update of what the heck is going on.
And I want to say that there's, efforts in Albany to pass legislation to make staging and construction acts incidents for the purposes of insurance fraud a felony, and also through the efforts of Congressman Nick Langworthy and John Faso on the infrastructure bill. There's federal efforts underway to fix the scaffold law and provide a fair comparative negligence for infrastructure projects. So we want to make sure that we try to support these things and to get some justice in the system.
Well, thank you so much, and have a Happy New Year, and we'll talk again real soon.
And thank you, sir, for saving New York.
With us today is John Terrett, and tell us, John, you report every week on how the markets are doing. Give us your opinion.
Well, John, Wall Street's major indices ended lower on the final trading day of 2025, which, of course, was last Wednesday. There was little economic data around for them. So the S&P fell 0.7%, the Dow was down 0.6%, and the Nasdaq fell by 0.8%. But that was last Wednesday. For the year, they all logged really solid gains. The Dow was up 13% in 2025, S&P 500, 16, 17%, something like that, and the Nasdaq surged 20% over the year. Really not too bad. And then around the globe, stock markets struck record highs and enjoyed double-digit gains over the past 12 months, thanks in very large measure to interest rate cuts from central banks, including, of course, our own Federal Reserve. And the minutes of the December meeting of the Fed were released last Tuesday, and they indicate that most of the officials see future rate cuts as appropriate, as long as inflation continues to cool over time, as expected. One word of warning, though, John, a surge in the tech sector off the back of huge amounts of cash being pumped into AI also pushed AI and tech stocks to record highs, but Wall Street is a little wary. They're slightly concerned that the valuations of AI stocks are too high, and that's gnawing away at some minds on the trading floor, where it was last week. By the way, silver was up 145% for the year. Gold was up 65%. Bitcoin underperformed. We thought it would do better. It did not. On Friday, Tesla released its latest deliveries, 418,000 in the fourth quarter. That's down about 16% over the same time last year. They're down about 8% for the year. And you know the reason why, because, of course, the incentives were taken off by President Trump. And Americans don't really like EVs. They prefer hybrids. And BYD, which stands for Build Your Dreams, the Chinese competitor to Tesla, is now the biggest seller of EVs in the world. Also on Friday, President Trump announcing he's delaying for 1 year tariffs on furniture and upholstery. That seems to be an eye on affordability. And talking of China, which we did just now, China's Facebook, which is called Baidu, announced on Friday that it's going to have a IPO in Hong Kong for its AI division. Well, John, you saw what happened on the markets on Friday, so now it is on to 2026 proper, the first full trading week coming up, starting tomorrow.
John Terrett, thank you for your report, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, John. I'll see you next Sunday.
thank you for being with us for the Cats Roundtable Local Edition, the #1 show on Sunday mornings in New York. Keep listening to us for the Cats Roundtable National Edition between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So we'll be back to you in a few minutes after the news.
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.